Welcome, everyone. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here for today's explainer. We are jumping right into a really fascinating journey through a full year of board minutes and the 2025 annual governance report for YRSCC 1268, which you probably know better as the Minto Water Garden. Specifically, we're going to put a massive spotlight on two things: their financial health review and their major project reports. We're going to see exactly how a condominium board actually navigates real-world challenges, balances complex budgets, and ultimately protects a million-dollar community. Let's get into it.
Okay, check out this number right off the bat. $136,037. I wanted to hook you with this immediately because this is the really impressive operating surplus the building reached by August of 2025. But, they definitely didn't start the year this way. So, how exactly did the building turn an early deficit into this massive surplus while still fully funding major projects? Well, let's open up the books and find out.
Here's our roadmap for today. We've taken months of intense administrative work and synthesized it into 5 neat buckets. 1. Financial health check. 2. Major repairs and maintenance. 3. Aesthetic and security upgrades. 4. The shared facilities dispute. And 5. Future outlook. Reserve fund.
So Section 1, financial health check, the bottom line. We're starting here because literally everything a community does begins with this. Notice the stark contrast here. We start with the reality of January 2025, an operating deficit of over $14,000. Not ideal, right? But then, look at the turnaround. By August, through some really rigorous financial monitoring, the board navigated their way to a year-to-date surplus of over $136,000. This establishes a really clear tone of responsible fiscal management right out of the gate. They carefully tracked their operating accounts against their reserve funds, which, by the way, sat comfortably over $1.5 million by mid-year. The crucial point here is understanding the exact financial maneuvers that secured this health. Back in September, the board ratified the 2025-2026 operating budget. Now, this did include a necessary increase in Common Element Assessment, or CEA fees, which just keeps pace with inflation and building needs. But they also made a very pragmatic accounting decision. They created a $28,312 provision for doubtful accounts. This actually stemmed from a dispute with Karma over who was responsible for a failed pipe joint. So rather than let uncertain receivables completely skew their reality, the board neutrally adjusted the books to reflect a much more accurate financial picture. Smart, right? Moving right along to Section 2, Major Repairs and Maintenance, the physical building. This is where we look at the project report to see exactly where that healthy operating budget is being spent. This perfectly illustrates the heavy lifting of condo management. These are the vital, often unseen, but absolutely critical projects. For example, the board invested just under $26,000 to thoroughly clean the kitchen drain stacks. Why do that? Well, because as any homeowner knows, proactive flushing prevents incredibly expensive and disastrous backups later on. They also restored the marble floors for roughly $16,000, protecting a high-end asset, and quickly addressed localized garage leaks down in P1 for just under $6,000. This is textbook preventative maintenance in action. Beyond those big-ticket items, the project report is full of these rapid-fire operational victories. They handled cooling tower pump replacements, knocked out annual fire safety deficiencies, and kept the garage clean with extensive power washing. But I really want to highlight this sharp administrative catch. The board realized they were paying a consultant, F. Shaw, for elevator testing that was actually already covered under their maintenance contract with Schindler. They decisively canceled the redundant contract. That is exactly how you save a corporation money. Let's shift gears to Section 3, Aesthetic and Security Upgrades, Enhancing the Community. Here we see investments that directly boost the community feel and resident safety. This vetting process gives us a great window into how the board handled upcoming lobby and corridor renovations. They absolutely didn't just take the first bid. They actively sourced quotes from multiple interior design firms, ranging from Form and Bang at $11,000 up to Hudson Cruz at $21,500. It shows real financial diligence. They're carefully weighing concept design, development, and construction drawing costs to ensure the community gets the best possible value for its future look. Now, this next number is substantial: $59,546. This represents a major landscaping investment with Almeida Landscaping and Davy Tree. You see, the Minto Water Garden is known for its nature comes home aesthetic. To protect that vibe, the board approved significant grading work to address sinkholes and, importantly, installed new irrigation drip lines to save the existing plant life. Spending money to keep your expensive vegetation alive? That's just smart asset management. On the security front, the board tackled a very modern concern: food delivery protocols. They implemented strict new steps to guarantee higher security. Now, when a courier arrives, food has to be accepted in the lobby area only. The central elevators are entirely locked out to outside couriers. It's a simple, straightforward policy change, but it ensures that unvetted individuals cannot freely roam the residential floors. Moving to Section 4, the Shared Facilities Dispute, External Challenges. We have to objectively look at the primary external hurdle of the year. Let's track how this built up. The corporation shares certain facilities with YRCC 1272, and there has been ongoing legal and financial friction regarding cost sharing and outstanding fees. The minutes record a very clear progression here: legal follow-ups in January, preparations for mediation in May, a formal mediation session scheduled in July, and then by September, the board was relying on legal counsel to drive communications toward arbitration. We're simply reporting the facts of the board's recorded steps as they work to resolve this really complex administrative challenge. A major point of contention in all of this is documented directly in the minutes. To quote exactly, Rabbi Zaltzman has refused to have the Shared Reserve Fund study updated. The last shared RFS update was 2019. Keep in mind, by Ontario law, these studies should be updated every 3 years. The board has continually pushed to get this shared study done, recognizing that accurate long-term financial planning is practically impossible when half your data is that out of date. And that brings us perfectly to our final section, Section 5, Future Outlook, Reserve Fund, and Long-Term Sustainability. Let's look at how the building is preparing its own finances for the decades to come. This is the vital question every single condominium must ask itself. How are we preparing for the next 30 years? To answer this, the board brought in an engineering firm, Synergy, to conduct a brand new reserve fund study for YRSCC 1268. The strategy the engineer employed here is fascinating. The Condo Act technically only requires a minimum 30-year projection. However, Synergy practically recommended projecting past that standard 30-year mark. Why? Well, because if you just stop at 30 years, you might completely miss capturing the massive funding needed for long-term building milestones, things like full window replacements. This deeply proactive approach ensures the corporation isn't caught off guard by a massive expense dropping on them in year 31. To actually fund this responsible long-term vision, Synergy's draft study outlined proposed fee increases. They recommended a phased-in approach, an average proposed monthly unit increase of $51 for the corporation's reserve and $24 for the shared items. Look, fee increases are never fun, but the board's minutes frame this not as a penalty, but as a deeply necessary, legally required, and highly responsible step for the long-term health of the physical building. Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought to wrap up our explainer today. What is the true long-term value of a deeply proactive and well-maintained community? Think about it. When you see a board diligently tracking every single dollar from a deficit to a surplus, optimizing maintenance contracts, enhancing security, and bravely planning decades into the future despite external disputes, you are seeing the active protection of your biggest asset. It's truly a masterclass in condo governance. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack Minto Water Garden's 2025 journey. Keep asking great questions, and I'll catch you next time.